Want to know the number one best sales advice that I ever got that eventually led me to close over 5.4 million in online sales? Well, I'm actually going to take you through a coaching call that I had with some of my private coaching clients, give you a little sneak peek behind the scenes of not just breaking down the first half, what that piece of sales advice actually was, but most importantly, in the second half of this coaching call, you're actually going to understand how to actually implement it into a practical sales call so that you can close more deals, right? Now, why this is super important to understand is if you actually know what to keep top of mind when you enter into a sales conversation, then everything else that is like super overwhelming in sales can go back to this one thing. It saves you time, it removes the friction from the whole sales conversation between you and the prospect, and most importantly, puts you in a position of control and certainty. So with that being said, I'm going to let you listen in on that coaching call right now. This is the top sales quote I ever got. I actually learned this from Eli Wild. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Eli Wild, but he was Tony Robbins' number one sales guy. So guy closed in like coaching sales over 100 million. So he's a 9-figure guy in coaching sales, which is pretty unheard of. Like on the high end of coaching sales, like 10 million, 20 million is really high. He 10x that, right? So he has over 100 million in sales. And he told me something that I'll never forget. So I was getting coached by him, and he says, Larry, you have to understand that 85% of the sale is made during discovery. 85% of the sale is made during discovery. But what did I used to do wrong? The thing that I used to get wrong is I would actually do it opposite. So I thought winning the sale was made during the pitch and presentation. I thought winning the sale was how can I overcome their let me think about it objections as good as possible. What I learned with him was it's actually the opposite. I want to spend this disproportionate time on discovery and getting deep to their problems, their goals, and why they're actually on the call, their motivations as much as possible. So that's one thing is this is the amount of time that I personally spent on sales calls. So a good discovery was about 20 to 25 minutes. A good pitch was anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. Shorter than expected. And going for the close, if there's no objections, is usually about 5 minutes. Now, if there's objections, it's higher than that, right? But once I started to understand kind of the Pareto principle, which is what leads to 80% of my success in the sales call, it's actually the first part, which is discovery. So if I can be very curious and ask as many questions as possible, I get my prospect to open up and start to sell themselves on why they would even want to work in the first place, right? So that's sales tip number one is like making sure that 85% of the sale is made during discovery and that you understand that. Any questions on that? That clear? Okay, cool. Number two, let me give you number two. So there was a study on what was the difference between the average sales rep versus the top sales reps. Okay. And they found something that was really interesting, which was over a 60-minute call, the top sales reps, actually, let's start with the average sales reps. They talked about 76% of the time. Anyone want to guess what the top sales rep talked? Let's hear in the chat. Let's put the guesses in the chat. I want to see it.
Less than 50.
15.
Who said less than 50? Mark. Bang on, brother.
There he is.
46%.
Oh,
46%. And that's including discovery, that's including the pitch, that's including going for the close. Like, that meant that the prospect talked more than the top sales rep. What's the truth oftentimes on sales calls? We're the ones talking the most. Right? Now, presentation, one-to-many, you're going to be talking the majority of the time. That's fine. One-to-one, though, it needs to be you listening. Right? So that's the number two sales tip that I would understand is like, How do I shut up? How do I ask the right questions and then just shut up? How do I not overbake the pitch? How can I turn what usually is a 25, 30-minute pitch? How can I cut that in half? 5 to 15 minutes. How can, as soon as I drop the price and I tell them how much it is, how can I just shut the hell up? And stop talking myself out of the sale. That is what you should be talking about. How do I get less being more, right? So that's number 2. Last but not least, number 3, sales is leadership. Sales is leadership. What people buy into is your way of thinking, your insights, okay? That's why people are on a call. It's not that people don't hate sales calls. It's that people don't believe you have anything of value or insight to hop on a call with you. If you fail to demonstrate that you actually have something of value to give to someone, they're not going to hop on a sales call because they just think you're going to waste their time. But if you lead with insight, you lead with leadership, you actually show them how to change their thinking from an old way of thinking to a new way of thinking that helps a transformation in themselves, in the business, in their organization. That's where sales is actually made. So I want you guys to think this is what sales actually is just sales is leadership. A leader provides insights. A leader provides a new way of thinking. A leader challenges a bad or old way, a negative, limited belief system. So that's all it is. I ask questions. I talk less than the other person. And I provide more insights than they even expected. Those are my top 3 sales tips, Daryl.